Epperly, a founder and CEO who's ready to rewrite the definition of imposter syndrome. I created Who Made You the Boss to let you know that you're not alone. If you've been wondering whether your burnout is actually a sign toward evolution, or if perhaps there's something more to these challenges we face as leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs, you're in the right place if you're looking to embrace the challenges you once perceived as negative, if you're ready to own your entire story, and if you're working to level up your business in ways you never thought possible. You'll learn all of this and more by listening in and doing the hard work you know you were meant to do. So let's get started together today on Who Made You the Boss. Welcome back, listeners, to this purpose-driven season of Who Made You the Boss. Today, we are featuring a guest who, no joke, changed not only my entire business, but my entire life. Shannon Miles is my personal mentor, and today you'll see just what kind of wisdom she brings to the table. Shannon is the co-founder of Belay, which she and her husband Brian launched during the Great Recession, a bold move that involved cashing in their 401ks and taking a leap of faith into entrepreneurship, and you will hear all about that today. But what you won't hear today are ads. You can thank our fabulous sponsors at Belmont for this season's ad-free listening experience. Reach out to my team at Jet Set World Travel, and we will make sure you are taken care of on your next trip to a Belmont property around the world, thanks to our Bellini Club partnership. In today's episode, I reference Shannon's belief in the law of expansion, and I'll invite you to dive deeper into that on the Who Made You the Boss Substack. You can find the link to that in the show notes, or make sure to visit lindsayepperly.substack.com to find out more. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or someone just navigating the complexities of professional growth, Shannon's insights are going to resonate deeply with you. We'll discuss the importance of stepping out of your comfort zone, viewing imposter syndrome as a muscle to exercise, and the significance of creating a business that benefits others well beyond its founders. I know you are in for a treat, listeners. So let's dive right in with Shannon Miles. All right, listeners, today you are in for a real treat because we have someone who, I don't say this lightly, literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. And I could actually probably just start bawling talking about this. But Shannon Miles is a personal friend and mentor who stepped into my life at a pivotal moment when I did not know if I could keep going in business, when I didn't know what I was meant to do, what was my purpose. You know, season 3 is all about purpose. So I could not complete this season without having Shannon on to talk about how she poured into me as a mentor, how she actually decided to intentionally become a mentor, and just some of the tangible takeaways that I have had over getting to know her over the years. So without further ado, hi, Shannon. Thanks for being on.
Hi, Lindsay. It is so good to see you. And let me just say, I'm so proud of you and what you've created. We're going to dive into it all, but I just had to start by saying, having known you for 8 years and seeing just like you said, the trajectory of your life and where you're heading, I'm just so incredibly proud. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate in this part of your many adventures.
Well, Shannon, you've been kind of a part in every single one of my adventures since I've known you. I have basically what happened. I feel like a little lost puppy that you discovered and you adopted me, whether you meant to or not. And I'm always like, hey, come be a part of this book that I'm writing. Hey, come be a part of this podcast that I'm doing. Hey, can you advise me on business? And you have always shown up with this amazing yes energy, and you have chosen to believe in me as a human. So hearing you say you're proud, thank you. It means a lot.
Well, and now Mila also calls me her mom too, which is
This is so funny. Brian and Shannon, so Shannon's husband, Brian, they came down, I guess it's been about a year now to visit.
Yeah.
And you had met Mila when she was a baby, but she was, 3 at the time. And for whatever reason, after you guys left, that night, she started saying, when will I get to see my new parents again? And Shannon actually meant to tell you this after I saw you last week. I said, you remember Aunt Shannon? I saw Shannon. Oh yeah, my new parents. I was like, what? Where did you get that from?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. We'll figure out a way to leverage that as she grows up.
Absolutely.
If you have to be the good cop, I can be the bad cop. However that works to serve her. Yeah. Can you ever have enough parenting? I don't know.
Thank you for that. To be honest, I have learned a lot from you as a parent because I've learned a lot from you in all facets of life. And so listeners, I've kind of touched on this whole conversation of Shannon changed the trajectory of my life because she intentionally set out to become a mentor. And so Shannon, I kind of want to talk about that. You created a mentorship group for women in business. And it was a very specific crossover, women of a certain age at a certain stage of business that you felt like you could pour into. I mean, tell us more about like what even made you go do that.
I have always sought out mentors in my life, whether it was somebody older at church when I was younger or in business when I was getting started and trying to find my way in a big corporation. I always looked for people who were a season ahead of me that I admired, that I looked up to, and had like a lot of qualities that I wanted to emulate. So I very much believed in mentorship, and then I stopped being the youngest person in the room. And so having had that mindset myself, having seen a model for doing it, I felt like in 2015 I had learned enough that I felt like I had something to give.
Mm.
Certainly not that I had it all figured out, but the truth is there's never a perfect time to mentor. But if you feel the call on your heart or the pull or the tug, whatever, I think you have to answer it at some point. And so in 2015, I felt like I was at that place. So I decided that I was going to create a group called Balance Mentoring, which ran the calendar year of 2016.
Mm. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to be in the right time in the right place to participate in that group. And I remember you saying actually when you were so intentional, every single meeting you would essentially set the table, right? Invite us in and tell us this is what we're going to get out of this today. And I remember you actually bringing up that you felt like you wanted to give back in some way, shape, or form. And you could have very easily gone to a charity. You could have gone to a soup kitchen. You could have given financially. You could have done a number of different things that were, or typically set out before us to be able to give back. But you decided, I want to take it a level deeper because I feel like I have this unique ability and this unique gifting, which is I have the experience in business.
Yeah.
And that was that was a powerful statement now 8 years ago because you used those unique gifts to pour into people. I'm curious because I feel like it goes so much further beyond mentoring for you, right? Like, do you have kind of a specific why or a North Star that you follow?
I feel like my purpose is to inspire other people. And that has taken different shapes over the years. But in 2010, I became a business owner and I started to realize the unique challenges that that presented, especially as a woman.
Mhm.
And there are just not a lot of environments where business owners can show up as their whole selves, right? And I wanted to create a space that allowed for that. And I think through those spaces, you really can inspire. And it's never about like having all the answers. And it's never about like, look at me and how amazing I've done it. Do it this just like that. Like it's just like, no, people just need a space to show up and be real and talk about the wholeness of who you are. And I just always loved business. I've always loved leadership. I have always felt like that's a unique, almost a value proposition that I bring.
Yeah.
Is just being so passionate about business and knowing that it's a vehicle that can really create a lot of good in the world. And
Mm.
so when creating balance, I wanted it to be for a very specific woman who loves her family, but loves her business and wants to have a successful organization that they're leading and make an impact on the world in that way. And so I think that sort of just like aligned with a lot of things that I was really passionate about. But that inspiration has always been a really big part of what I consider to be my purpose.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. Even just hearing that answer, you use words and phrases that I don't hear in the common culture vernacular when it comes to using a business as a vehicle and using that to create impact. Um, and you would just infuse the conversations we would have with that. And so I'm hoping listeners, you pick up on this because the way you look at your business is it defines the way that you're going to grow and scale and treat your business. And I think that was one of the biggest things that you changed for me in my trajectory is I had been looking at my business for so long as I don't even know how to describe what I was looking at it beforehand, right? Like it was a means to an ends to a mean. What is that phrase? But like it was this level of not having intentionality. It was I saw an opportunity. I created something based on that opportunity. And I just kind of one foot in front of the other kept trying, which works to a certain degree. But that business very much owned me at the time.
Yeah.
And so then you come in and teach me, I mean, I think Rich Dad Poor Dad was something you had us all read at one point, right? Like you teach me, let's start looking at what you've created as exactly that, something you've created. It is not your identity. It does not own you. You own it. Let's make it work for you. And so that mindset shift alone was huge in transforming my business.
Well, you were very much in the hustler stage when we met, right? You had worked in the travel business for a while. You knew that you wanted to have your own agency, but you had to take this initial step of branching out from the one that you were with to kind of build the profile that you wanted. Like you were very much one and the same
Yeah.
with Belay travel, right? And you had to be, right? You were the one creating it. And so you were very much in the hustler stage, and that works for a while
Mm-hmm.
for a business owner. I think you kind of have to go through that to say, like, do I even have something here? Like, I have this great idea or this thing that I'm passionate about, but is the market, open for it? Is this something I'm going to actually be able to make money doing? And then when you realize, and we go through a program like this together in 2016, like, oh, okay, this can and should be a separate thing from who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the evolution of going into the phase of being an entrepreneur. And that's when you realize, okay, I can't build this thing in such a way that everything rises and falls on me. Like if I want this business to be something that I do for a long time, something that doesn't burn me out, something that augments my life and doesn't deplete it, then I have to change my mindset and become an entrepreneur and start to grow it in a different way.
Well, and you actually, I completely forgot about this, how you outline specific phases of entrepreneurship and will you tell the listeners each of those phases and kind of what, like a quick little snippet of what each of those looks like?
Yeah, sure. So, a hustler's a lot of what we talked about, right? You got like a great idea, you're passionate about it. Maybe it's a side hustle for a while.
And
So,
that's phase one, right? This is the
yeah,
beginning of entrepreneurship, hustlers. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In the beginning, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're wearing all the hats.
Yes.
And that's fun until you realize this is not sustainable. And I have to decide if I'm going to evolve and become an entrepreneur, somebody who starts to become a leader,
Mm-hmm.
starts to replace themselves in the business, starts to trust other people, which, oh, that's hard, right?
Yes. So that's entrepreneur is stage two. Like this is
Yeah,
like the evolution of I'm no longer the one doing all the things. I'm now deciding to rise up and start to delegate, which is extremely hard to your point.
yeah, nothing will make you question who you are as a person more than
Yeah.
trust somebody and delegating this thing that you're passionate about.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Control Freaks Anonymous meets here daily.
that's the thing that makes you successful, right? But
Yeah.
you have to evolve past that. So the entrepreneur is phase two, and then eventually, you're realizing, okay, the market's responding to this. It's starting to scale. You're starting to hit some financial markers in your business. You've probably broken 1 million in revenue. And then you start to realize, okay, I actually need to become a CEO,
Mm.
meaning I have a leadership team underneath me. I have people who own different disciplines of this business that are reporting to me. They're the ones building the budget. They're the ones reporting on the KPIs and defining objectives. And I'm leading this organization at a different way. Each of these phases, you're jumping a chasm. You're jumping a chasm from being a hustler to an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur to a CEO. And the last chasm, which I think is the hardest one to jump, is to be an owner. And I wasn't even in that, category back when we first met. I'm definitely there now, but that's where you have relinquished the majority of control of the business. You've appointed a CEO or a president to replace you. You might even have a seat on the board. You might have, even entered the sales process if that was your intention to sell. Like that ownership requires an absolute break in your identity from your identity in the business.
Mm.
And
Gosh.
that's why that chasm is a really, really hard one to jump.
Yeah.
But, yeah, those are the 4 phases of business ownership.
Thanks for outlining those. Gosh, it's been years since we talked about those phases, and it's so interesting to see the life cycle of a business and the life cycle of the founder, and how, you can get stuck in one of those phases very easily because you might not know what it takes to jump that chasm. And you've even called those, I think, like re-up moments, right? Where you start identifying, okay, this can stay the same forever and become complacent, or I can recognize that we have more potential on the other side of this chasm, but it's going to make me break some things and start over. Like every time we get up against that tension of re-upping. And I want to talk a little bit about you and your story, because you just outlined the life cycle of a business and a business owner, and it's one that you have walked every single phase of that now multiple times over. But let's talk a lot
Yeah.
about Belay. And I've told the listeners a little bit about what you and Brian, your husband, had created with Belay. Uh, but one of the things that's so striking as part of your story is that the two of you quit your jobs on the same day, cashed in your 401ks with 2 young kids at home. Both Rainey and Harper were around at that point, right?
They were.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was also the Great Recession. So
Yeah, there
timing
was that too.
was
Yeah.
pretty interesting on that decision. What gave you the confidence to do that? Right. I mean, for the outside looking in, that would be the worst possible time to do such a crazy big decision. But you guys took that risk and you bet on yourselves. Like, what did that look like for you, and how did you get that confidence?
Yeah, I'm walking down memory lane here. Yeah, so this was 2010.
Hmm.
I was working for McKesson, which was at that time, I don't know, Fortune 15 something company, big corporation. I loved it. I was like, this place is awesome. I can climb this corporate ladder and I'll retire from here. And Brian was working for a church construction company, so totally different industry, but he was on the road all the time, just not the lifestyle that we wanted. And then for the first time in my career there, I just sort of hit a wall where there was no next right move for me. And that hadn't happened in all the positions that I had had there. And so I was like, huh, okay, maybe there's a bigger change that needs to take place here. And at the same time, Brian was feeling like, okay, I've kind of capped out at my growth potential at this job. We'd always wanted to have something on, on our own. But yeah, you're right. It was 2010. Like we're still in the recession. Rainey was 5, Harper was 2. We had great jobs with benefits and all the stability that I grew up learning was like the thing that you aim for, right? You work a stable job, you get your benefits and you get your retirement and you've won.
Mhm.
But we were just restless and really felt like if we were ever going to take a risk and make the leap, like this was the time to do it because we were still pretty young. We were in our 30s and we
Mhm.
thought, well, we're going to cash in our 401ks to fund this because we didn't want to borrow from anybody because we weren't sure if this was going to work. And kind of, jump on the grenade, if if it explodes and you don't hurt anybody else. And we thought, well, okay, so if it doesn't work, we'll leave our jobs well and we can go back, hopefully,
Mhm.
and if
Mhm.
we deplete our 401ks, we're young enough to build that retirement back up. But it was a huge risk. It really
Yeah.
was. But the truth is, and you know this, we take risks all the time. And sometimes that risk is staying where you are.
Mm. Oh, wolf. Yeah.
Right? Sometimes that risk is knowing that you need to do something to make a change, but just not having all the answers to feel confident in making it, and you're taking a risk by staying where you are.
It makes me think too. I mean, but now in retrospect, we can say the risk for Belay paid off well beyond your wildest dreams, which is incredible. So Shannon and
Oh,
Brian sold the majority interest in Belay in 2021. And it's so interesting to see, you and I were talking the other day about how most entrepreneurs don't pursue their dreams, not because of access to resources or access to time or the things that they need, the tools that they need. What stops them from pursuing their dreams is actually that they get in their own way. They get in their own head, that there's that inner critic that honestly sounds a lot like imposter syndrome, like we talk all the time
yeah,
on the show about. And so I want to camp out on that. Like, what
yes.
has your experience been with that? And, how has that how have you leveled with it to be able to keep looking it in the face and saying, nope, the risk would be staying where I am. I have to move forward, or I'm not going to listen to that today because I know I have to re up and level up. Like, what does that look like for you over the years?
It has definitely been a muscle that I've had to exercise. Inherently, I don't think I'm a risk taker
Mm,
necessarily. So when I felt so convicted, called, compelled, whatever, to start Belay, like to leave my job and start Belay with Brian, it it just didn't feel like such a big risk. Like it
mhm.
felt um it just and it didn't feel like my idea in a lot of ways too. Like, it felt
Yeah.
like, "This is what you're supposed to okay, I'll go do it," right? Like, and so there's a huge faith and trust element, that added to my confidence in doing that. But I don't even know that it was confidence, like, that this thing was gonna work, but it was a confidence that I had to try,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense. And I know we talk about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is something that I have forced myself almost to have throughout my whole life because I've always put myself in situations where I wasn't prepared or
Hmm.
I didn't have all of the resources or I hadn't done the thing before and you do it anyway.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to become the person that you want to be ultimately someday if you don't put yourself out there and take a role that you've never had before or apply for a job that you're completely
Mhm.
unqualified for, right? Like I was
Yeah.
always like I was managing people like in my early 20s who were in their 50s. I had no business. Absolutely no business managing these professionals, but for whatever reason, I was just in that role and you have to decide in those re-up moments like no, I'm not necessarily equipped going into this, but you bet I'm going to figure out how to be the best manager, the best business owner, the best mentor that I can be because this is the responsibility that's been given to me. So it's
Yeah.
my job to respond to it.
I love that take on it, Shannon. I feel like those types of things are seen in our culture as such a negative, right? Like, oh no, you've got the gremlins in your head or the inner critic or the imposter syndrome. But actually what you've just defined is you've got a challenge in your way. And you're the type of person that meets that challenge eye to eye and says, I will overcome this. Like to me, it's actually a gift that that is showing up in those moments because it's kind of like your body's alert system of like, hey, you got something new. And it's up to you to decide if you want to try this out or if you want to kind of back away.
Mhm.
And I think that's one thing when it comes to our confidence. I think it's another thing when we're assessing our businesses and we're assessing where we're at with things and we're deciding, do we re up, right? Like that looks a little bit different. And I mean, I'll never forget. So, everyone, when Shannon ran the mentorship program, she assigned us a book every month and we read 12 business/personal books that were absolutely life changing. And one of those was this teeny tiny little book called The Dip. And you had us read The Dip, which was it's by Seth Godin, and it's all about do I keep going? I'm in the dip. I'm in this moment where I can't tell if I want to move forward or not. Do I keep going or do I, fold in my cards and try something new? And I remember when we read this book, just to give you guys an idea of what 8 years ago looked like at Jet Set, which was then Epperly Travel. I guess we turned 10 this year. So it was a 2-year-old business. And I was sitting there going, should I charge for my services? I don't know. It's a really big decision to charge for your services in this industry. That's not the common thing to do. I don't know. It's been really worrying me. And should I keep my team? I've built this kind of like team of individuals that I was mentoring professionally, but they're taking a lot out of me and I'm not making a lot of money off of it yet. I can make a lot more money if I just focused on being the only salesperson, the chief salesperson, but then I couldn't grow and scale. And I just remember trying to make those decisions and reading the dip and deciding, okay, actually I'm going to re-up on this decision to charge for services. I'm going to re-up on this decision to keep that team. And those are literally the reason that JetSet is the company that it is today, right? Like those decisions to stay in it at the moment where I could have just as easily walked away from even pieces of the business. So I'm just curious to talk to you about those re-up moments. If anyone's listening right now and is like, oh man, I'm in that dip, I'm in that valley. Do I walk away from either the whole business itself or at least pieces of it that I've created, or do I stay? Like, what's the litmus test? How do we decide that?
Gosh, what an awesome question. I'm just thinking about re-up moments that I've had too
Mhm.
throughout my career, and it is so hard to know with certainty which direction you should go. It's a sliding doors moment. You could
Mm.
envision a universe where you you stay the size that you are, and you keep it small and manageable and safe.
Yeah.
And that feels like the safe thing to do. But the truth is, in business, very rarely can you just ride a stagnant line. You're either going to grow or decline. So in that scenario one, where you're thinking, okay, if I keep it small and I don't charge for the services and I let go of this team and I start to make a profit, which is, a thing that we should all strive for in business. There's different ways to get there. Like then you're taking that scenario and saying, this feels like the safe bet.
Mm. Hmm.
And I would question whether or not it really is a safe bet, because very rarely do businesses stay stagnant.
Yeah.
You'll
Well,
probably start to see a decline. So that's one universe you can choose to live in. The other universe is the opposite effect of that re-up moment, where you say, "Phew, okay, leadership is hard. It's making me challenge everything that I believe about myself and other people. But the only way to grow and scale this business and to have the impact that I want to have in this world is through leadership, and it's through growth, and it's through charging for my services, because I know there's value in what our organization brings to the world. And I'm making these bets on myself, and
mm,
I'm making these bets on the team. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but yes, I'll figure it out. I have before and I'll do it again."
absolutely. Ah, preach. I think so much of this makes a difference too, given your why and given the reasons behind making that decision of the sliding doors moment. And it leads me to think about you and Brian very much live by, do you call it the law of expansion or the principle of expansion? Like, what is your exact title that
Yeah,
you
principle. Yeah,
principle of
principle.
expansion. Okay, so guys, I should know this. Please don't tell Brian that I failed that test.
It's okay. It all feels very definitive, and I just know I don't have anything figured out, so I don't want to be that
No,
definitive by saying
it's good
law.
enough to make it on a sticky note that I plan on taking a picture of so that all the listeners can see what you drew me last weekend when I came to learn more about this from you, because you've taught me over the years and I needed to see it visually again. So listeners who are listening to this right now, I apologize that you can't actually see this, but if you subscribe to my Substack, I'm going to post it on that on lindsayepperly.substack.com, because I want you to see Shannon's exact drawing. Sorry, Shannon, I'm putting your art out there for the public. Uh, Proceeds will go to you, and you'll get some royalties. But really, let's talk about this, because you guys live by this idea that what we are creating in business or in art or in any sort of creative role is not just for ourselves, but it is for the purpose of expansion. And so you've even got kind of like tenets to this, to where if we swing bigger, we can expand bigger. And that means we can give bigger and we can live bigger. And so I just want to camp out on that for a little bit. Can you talk to me about the principle of expansion?
Yes, I would love to. And also, you just articulated it perfectly. So, okay, yeah, in business, in life, with our influence, our relationships, we expand, right? If you have a growth mindset and you are a constant learner, there's expansion happening all the time. And I experienced that very much with, Belay, like you mentioned, the bet paid off, the risk paid off, right? We sold the company and it was a huge success for our family personally, for the organization as it continues to grow. We found a great private equity firm to partner with. So the expansion was very obvious and very tangible through Belay. And with that expansion, I was able to gain power. And we all do. Like when you expand, you're inherently, as a leader, as a business owner, you're going to gain power. And it's a scary thing
Mm.
sometimes. That power can be a challenge to accept. It can be something that we've seen other people make a mess of and ruin relationships over and do some really shady stuff. So power can be a really negative thing, but it can also be an amazing force for good. And so when we expand, then we gain power, and then we have to decide, what are we going to do with that power? Are we going to consume it? Are we going to eat, drink, and be merry and YOLO? Or are we going to give it away for the sake of others?
Mm.
And it's that recognition that the power can be used for the benefit of other people, and you're still retaining it, right? You're not completely depleting yourself, but you're recognizing, I've been given this influence and this opportunity. How can I use it for good? And so for us, that looks right now like starting a nonprofit
Mm.
to serve business owners, which I'm sure we can talk about. But like that's what giving it away for the sake of others looks like for us right now. For you, it was when you started the program with Jet Set, where you're investing in the agent in the travel
Mhm.
industry overall. There's an altruism, I think, that power affords us the opportunity to exercise. And so then the final step of that cycle is to repeat it
Mm.
because we don't stay stagnant, right? We want to keep growing. We want to live in that growth mindset. And so you're going through this principle of expansion, you're repeating it. And then with each cycle, it's kind of getting bigger. And like I said, that can be really scary, or that can be something that, as Amy, who you had on the podcast, told me, no, you just need to step into your power. And when you do that, it can be a really beautiful litmus test to kind of run things through in your life. This isn't just for business. This was in our family manifesto before we applied it to our organizations and to those that we mentor and support. So I think the principle of expansion has been something that we've just inherently known and done for a long time, and now we're just kind of starting to put some structure around it.
I mean, you said it really well the other day, and granted, this was in the context specifically of faith. And listeners, Shannon and I both share a Christian faith background, which has been one of the really the coolest parts of our mentorship is that it's so multifaceted. So oftentimes you're teaching me from a place of that faith background. But you said the other day, our culture is so focused on action and how often we need to be moving and doing and hustling and grinding. But rest is an action too. And so there is a level of knowing when it's okay to give ourselves permission to say, all right, I have this vision, I have this dream, I want to go for it wholeheartedly, but I also want to take care of myself. I also need to know when rest exists. And I think actually it's funny you mentioned Amy Porterfield, who, thank you again, you were the wonderful connection who allowed me to have a conversation with her for our very first episode of Who Made You the Boss. I'll link to that, you guys, because she talks a lot about her seasons that she has really intentionally crafted in her business to make sure that a quarter every year is a season of rest. Like she knows it's going to be scaled back when it comes to how much she's doing. And that's why she works really, really hard the rest of the year. And I think that that's really great because sometimes we're hustling for our dreams so much that we don't take that time to rest, right? Like I'm actually was just writing about it this morning. I took the sabbatical-ish over the summer and I set the goal of taking that sabbatical 8 years ago. Like that, actually, I guess it was around the time that you and I
Wow.
started working together. But I also read the book Clockwork at that time, which helped me outline it. And I just interviewed Mike Michalowicz. But that's 8 years ago. And so I didn't really carve out a lot of intentional rest time in between then and now because I was working toward the sabbatical, right? So, yes, maternity helped a lot. But if we don't carve out that time in our kind of like daily cadence, weekly cadence, monthly cadence, then it sometimes feels like, oh, I've got to just get to the end of this thing and sell it. And then I can breathe out like that. That's not how we have to live. So
Right.
I do think it's really important to note that sometimes you have those moments of retreat. Sometimes even within the business ecosystem, you have to kind of just take a pause, take a rest, and you come back refreshed. I think that's really important. You guys did the same thing with a sabbatical yourselves, I believe.
Yeah, we took a sabbatical in 2019.
Yeah.
And that for us looked like 3 months out of the CEO role of the business. Brian and I shared that role for the last few years of it. We appointed an interim CEO and had some very defined metrics of what that sabbatical, would look like.
Yeah.
And then when we came back, we spent the last half of the year fully transitioning that role over to Trisha, and she assumed the CEO position in January of 2020.
Cool.
But, you talked earlier about, deciding your re-up moments. Like January 2020, right? Like nobody, like that was going to be like the best year ever. Everybody was planning for like the best year ever. And then we all know what happened. And it would have been really tempting to come back in and like second guess that decision and say, oh gosh, we need to get back in this business and try to recover on some of the loss, which fortunately we were a virtual services organization. We did just fine. But like at the end of the day, that's when you have to like double down on that decision of, right? Like, was this the right call? Yes, I'm just gonna I'm gonna stick with that. And it was absolutely the right decision to keep her in that role, and she completely slayed it. And it galvanized the team. So, there are some really tangible benefits of sabbatical and stepping away from the business. First of all, for you to know that the business can continue without your day-to-day involvement. That's
Mhm.
huge for a business
Mhm.
owner. It also proves to people in your organization that you trust them, like you
Yeah.
really trust them, and it gives them an opportunity to absolutely thrive. So whether you bank it all and then have this big sabbatical at once, I would recommend incrementally getting there along the way as the years go on. But I think there is a huge value in finding rhythms in your business where it's less intense, where you're able to step away for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever that looks like. And when you do that, I don't know if well, I do know that you experienced this, but we talked about this. I don't know if you talked about it on the podcast or not, but like there are some magical things that happen in your business when you step away from it
Mm.
and really trust that it doesn't have to rely on you every single day. That's when you open up space and you create this vacuum for these supernatural opportunities to have, or these revelations to occur, or these opportunities maybe that you've been working on that just so happen to come to fruition in that space. I've seen it time and time again in our business. I've seen it with you, and I've seen it with other people. So that would be an encouragement that I would give to the
Yeah.
listener. It's like if you if you really think that the business has to have you in it completely every day, you're probably missing out on some freedom that you could be experiencing in your business and creating some space for some magic.
Mm, that's so good. And just kind of in summation, taking it back to the original conversation, which is that of mentorship. This is an opportunity, especially if you're in the C-suite position and you've got a team that's working with you to actually allow them to step up as leaders. That was one of the amazing byproducts that I saw. I mean, granted, we were very intentional laying the groundwork before we took our summer abroad, but giving individuals the autonomy to actually do their jobs without us looking over their shoulders, right?
Because I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we want an organization that's going to survive beyond us, probably, right? Like, wouldn't it be
Yeah.
great if we created something that lived on, when
Yes.
even after we're involved? Like, what a beautiful thing to leave as part of your legacy.
Yeah.
And so, in order to do that, you have to engage other people and trust them and lead leaders and become that humble level 5 leader that allows for a thoughtful transition to take place,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
somebody else or some other organization that will continue on the work that you started.
Yeah. This is a beautiful conversation. I could talk to you all day as I try my best to anytime we're together. But for the listeners, we'll wrap it up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My last question I always like to ask guests, and you know this because you've been around my dinner table with Mila in particular, who loves to ask the question of what made you smile today. So, Shannon, what made you smile today?
Oh my goodness. I just got to spend the weekend with my daughter, who is a freshman in college. She came home unexpectedly for the weekend, and it was just so life-giving. I got to see that she's okay. I got to see that I'm okay. And all the things that I had built up in my head as the big scary things about her going to school just weren't there when she got to come home. And we got to go shopping together, and we bought matching jeans, and I have my jeans on today, so that's making me bask in the glory of this weekend, and I look pretty cute in these jeans too.
I love everything about this. Shout out to Rainey. Thank you for
Yes.
going shopping with your mom and for your mom being cool enough for you guys to wear the same jeans. That is just another level of epic. Shannon, you're the best. Thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you. I love you so much.
If you've gained some valuable insights from listening to Who Made You the Boss, there are 2 ways we ask our listeners to show us some love. First, share this episode with a friend who you know would benefit. The more we impact others, the more we can grow our resources to impact you. It's a win-win and it helps us a ton. Second, if you'll take a moment to leave Who Made You the Boss a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, that helps us continue to create meaningful work and it just makes our day. Thank you, listeners, for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep being the boss of your own incredible story.